Again, what a wonderful prayer and praise time. My goodness. Let's give it up for our leaders who led us through that time. Let's give it up for the music ministry. Amen. Let's give it up for Heavenly Hands. Amen. We had something to stick to our ribs tonight. We are grateful, cannot get enough of soup during this particular season. Amen. Amen. Well, we have been talking about the Red Sea. We've been talking about this Red Sea. And now we've made it to session number 5. And let me just pause just for a moment. Try to see if we can get a definition, if not a description, of what the Red Sea can be. I raised that question, the icebreaker. Go ahead and put the icebreaker up there, Danny. Has your personal Red Sea produced a panic-prone reaction? Okay. And I want to just leave it up there, Danny, because I want to kind of talk about how we can define, if not describe, a Red Sea. A Red Sea can be something that you did not see coming. It just happened. And so Red Seas can be invisible. It is something that God saw it. And a Red Sea can be something that God creates, but it can also be something that God allows to be created. That is, God can see us going down the wrong way and know where it's going to lead us and not stop it. So a Red Sea can be something that He creates. Okay. Sometimes God has to create circumstances that we might come to know that He is God. And let me just say this, faith is not believing in God's existence. Because non-believers say that there's a man upstairs. Atheists say there's a superpower. Okay, non-believers say, hey, they talk about karma and the universe and all of that. And so they can in some way believe in the existence of God. And so faith is not simply believing in His existence, but faith is putting our lives in His hand because we trust Him to be Himself. We trust God to be Himself. So a Red Sea can be something that we didn't see coming. And God can create it, or God can allow it to be created. Okay? God can, He can bring the Red Sea to us, and He can take us to the Red Sea. Okay? So, number one, it's something impossible we didn't see coming. But then a Red Sea can be something impossible. That is, it is no way we can handle it. It is no way we can handle it. Have you ever bitten off more than you can digest? Have you ever created your own Frankenstein and it turned on you? something we cannot handle. Okay? And again, sometimes God can do the creating, or also God can allow us to manufacture or bring about a situation or a circumstance that is beyond our control. Okay? So it is something that we don't see coming. It is something we cannot handle, but it can also be something that is improbable. And that is, you have never experienced anything so difficult. This, where you are now, is the worst thing you have had to deal with. It's improbable. Okay. And then lastly, it is something that is incomprehensible. You don't understand why God let it happen. You're trying to understand. You're trying to understand it. Okay? So these are situations that can be like the Red Sea. Okay? Those are descriptions of how the children of Israel must have felt when they approached that Red Sea. Okay? And so we raise this question again: has your personal Red Sea produced a panic-prone reaction from you? Okay? So tonight we want to deal with what it means when Moses says, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." Okay? Romans chapter 12, verse 19. It's a passage that contextually it talks about retribution. What is retribution? What is retribution? Payback, right. So the context of that is Paul talking about how believers are to not respond when someone has injured us or harmed us. Okay? And so the context here, go ahead and put it up. Beloved, never avenge yourselves. That is, do not take matters into your own hands. Okay? If someone has done something to you, our first reaction is not to turn around and do that same thing to others. Okay? All right? He says, never avenge yourselves. Here it is. But leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So one of God's attributes, okay, is judging or judgment. Okay? God can judge. Okay? You and I can trust God to fight our battles. Right? So we don't have to fight people who are fighting us. We don't have to pay back and all of that. So when it says leave room, for, what Paul is literally saying is that you've got to learn how to trust God to be God. Okay? Trust God to be God. Okay? Trust God to handle things. Okay? In God's own time. Okay? So if we can make room for the wrath of God or the judgment of God, then there are several other attributes that we want to learn how to give God room. Okay? And you see in your handout, these are a list of other attributes. Okay? The first attribute is his power. You have to, you cannot think that you have enough power to handle your situation. You cannot even believe that you and everybody else together got enough power. Okay? You have to know that just like you leave room for God, okay, to bring about payback, you got to also leave room for his power. Okay? You got to leave room for his power. What is that? Psalm 150, I think, in verse 1, speaks of God's power. Go ahead and put that up, Danny. Psalm 150 and 1. It says, praise the Lord, praise God in his sanctuary, praise him in his powerful or his mighty firmament. Everything is God's, right? God has the power to not only create, but he has the power to sustain what he has created. All right. So that's one of his attributes. So we don't have to take matters into our own hands thinking we helping God. He has the power. So you got to make room for his power. Number two, we have to make room for his wisdom. How many of us believe God knows the best thing to do? He's wise, right? Okay. How many of us know that God knows us better than we know ourselves? Okay. So his wisdom, James 1 and 5. Okay. Let's put that up. If anyone lacks what? Ask who? And what does he do? Who gives it what? Generously and what? Ungrudgingly, and he will what? Give it to you. Okay. So we have to make room for his power. Okay. Now, that does not mean that God needs something far from us so he can do something. That don't mean that. What that means is that we have to take into consideration our limitations, okay, and his unlimitedness. He is unlimited in every respect, okay? So that's what it means, okay? All right? So we never say, well, I guess I'm just going to pray about it. No, we don't say that. No. The first thing we're going to do is pray about it, okay? See, sometimes when we conclude, say, I'm just going to pray about it, that means we've tried everything else. No, we need to pray first and not do anything else. Okay? So, his power, his wisdom, but then number three, his grace. You got to give room for his grace. That's what Paul had to learn. About the thorn, God, remove this from my life so that I can do something for you. God says, no, I'm going to leave that there and do something for you. He says, my grace is what? Sufficient. Okay? But this passage, as I mentioned Sunday, the more sin abounds, what? Grace what? Grace abounds more. God will never run out of grace. He will never run out of grace. Okay? In fact, I don't even wake up tomorrow if he out of grace. Don't wake me up, God. I need you to call me from labor to reward. I'm ready to see you. I don't want a day without his grace. I'm telling you. And so you and I don't have to face a day without his grace. Okay? Let alone his mercy. Morning by morning, what is what? What kind of mercy is it? Mercy we have not used. Okay? So his grace, that Romans passage, but the law came in, and with the result that trespass multiplied. But where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. Thank God. His grace is sufficient. Okay? Listen, see, a lot of people think they need his power. Sometimes you just need his grace. See, we want his power so he can stop suffering, but he gives you grace so you can endure the suffering. That's the grace. He gives you enough grace so you won't complain. Okay? It's grace. All right? So we have his grace, but then also how God intervenes, how he intercedes. We have to make room for him to intercede. Okay? Have you ever wanted God to stop or to change your situation as soon as it happened? Sure. But guess what? Sometimes he allows it to go on until we reach our limitations. And then he intervenes or he steps in. Okay? Let's look at that Hebrews 7:25. Okay? Consequently, he is able for what? All time to save those who approach God through him, since he always lives to do what? Make intercession. He is always involved in our affairs. Okay, so his intervention. But then one other attribute, and that's the timing of God. Okay? Look at Psalm 31:15. My times are what? In your hand. Deliver me from the hand of my enemies and persecutors. Okay? Time is in his hand. And so we have to make room for God to work. Don't ever think the results or the outcome is up to you, or it is up to me. No. You got to give God room to work. Okay? All right. So, the Lord delights in doing the impossible. Now, the reason why we know this is the case, put up Ephesians 3:20. This is one of our favorite passages, right? Now unto him, okay, who by the power at work within us is able to what? Accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine. Okay. Aren't you glad that God does not allow life to become boring? That's why something breaks out every now and then. Because life is just bar humbug. It's just business as usual. Then God lets something happen. Or he lets the enemy think that they got you. or something happens that we didn't see happen. Again, so life just kind of happens. And that is when God is at his best. Okay? Okay. All right. So as we have to make room for the wrath of God to work. God is going to bring to pass. Don't worry about that. Don't worry. He's going to deal with that. And so we have to also make room again for those other attributes that we just listed there. Okay? So now we see that we do not have to panic, right? We don't have to. We just got to be patient with God. We've got to give him room to work. Okay? Secondly, when we look at this Exodus passage again, we're going to discover how fearful the Israelites were and how they were afraid. And they were in utter terror. Okay? But we also want to pay close attention to why is it we see in the Old and the New Testament this phrase, fear not or don't be afraid, so many times. You see the numbers there. In the Old Testament alone is mentioned 107 times. Fear not or do not be afraid. Okay. But then when you look at the New Testament, it's mentioned 42 times. I wonder why God has it there so often. Okay. And so this statement of summation here, go ahead and put it up, Danny. Such phrases are mentioned so much because that's our, number one, that's our first reaction. Okay? It is a common condition among humans or a great priority with God. Do not fear, or fear not. Do not be afraid. It's interesting that the first thing that God tells Joshua after Moses has been called off the scene, he said, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Do not be afraid. Okay. So as you and I think about the times that you and I have been full of fear or just afraid beyond anything else that we've had to face, could it be that God wanted to manifest himself in such a way that it would increase our faith? And when we say afraid, we're afraid of the outcome. We're afraid of not just the outcome, but we're afraid of what it's going to do to us. We're afraid that this might be it. We're afraid that we won't recover. I mean, and on and on and on. And only you can kind of know how you felt when you were face to face with a Red Sea. You know, what was your greatest fear? What was your greatest concern? But with the children of Israel, and we'll get to this in a moment, well, let's go ahead and look at it. Let's look at verse number 11. Exodus 14. Let's look at verse number 11. Now, last week we was talking about what? What did we talk about in session 4, if you got your handout? What did we talk about in session 4? Cry out, right? Yeah, cry out. Yeah. Pray, cry out. Okay? And then Bubba was trying to rob me of my thunder for the night, and Bubba was saying, well, they didn't believe, wasn't there doubt in that? And he's absolutely right, but we don't get it until we come on, we move forward to verse number 11. He was right. Because listen to their response, okay? They said to Moses, and this word said is translated, they murmured. Okay? And to murmur is to name. Notice what they say. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Now, what they are doing is that they are naming, okay, that the reason why they are at the Red Sea was because there were no graves in Egypt, and Moses wanted them not to die in Egypt, but he wanted them to die in the wilderness. Be careful what you name your situation. Let me tell you how we name our situation. Okay? God, this is not fair. God, why did you let this happen to me? God, I don't deserve this. God, why are you punishing me? God, why have you forsaken me? We are naming the situation. That's what they did. Like Moses wanted to go to a Red Sea. Moses was with them, right? So just like they had to trust God, Moses had to trust God. Right? Okay. And so here they began, this is the very beginning of their murmurings. They murmured about one thing after. They murmured about water. They murmured about the fact that they were going to die. They murmured about the fact that they were going to die. They murmured about one thing after. They murmured one thing after. They murmured about 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 one thing after. They m They murmured about how water tastes. They murmured about what they was going to eat. They murmured about how they had too much to eat. They murmured about everything. Okay? And they were wrong about everything because they refused to trust God. They refused to give God room. And whenever you and I don't give him room, we call it something that it is not. God is not picking on me. God is promoting me. God is not punishing me. God is using me. Okay. God is not getting rid of me. God is putting me on display. Okay. But we name it. Okay. And the reason why we name it is because of emotions. Okay. Let's look at this next section. Controlled or uncontrolled emotions. Do you have challenges in controlling your emotions? Are you more quick to feel than you are to walk by faith? Do you name your situation based upon how you feel? Yep. Look at that statement of summation. The very word emotion is the word motion with an E in front of it. That's why emotions are all over the place. Think about our emotions. Okay. Look at the list. Go ahead and put them up, Danny. Within the run of the day, we are up and down. Spiritually bipolar, Peters, that's what she said. Up and down now. One minute we love God, the next minute we hate God. Our emotions, they are up and down. Okay? At church, in the sanctuary, we up. Get home, we down. Okay? Up and down, emotion. But then our emotions go all over. Sometimes there are times where we are anxious. Other times we are downcast. Or we are weighed down. That is depression. It impacts all of us. Okay? There are times where we are enraged about situations and circumstances. We are mad at God. We are mad with God. And sometimes we can look at somebody else's situation and we can tell God they don't deserve it. It's kind of like Cain and Abel. What did Cain do to Abel? But he was mad at God. Okay. And so sometimes our reactions towards other people, it's not that we're just mad at them, but in some kind of way we have this ought with God, our emotions. Okay? They don't deserve that, I do. They haven't been as good as I've been. Okay. So our emotions. Then there's love, hate, then there's withdrawn, and then there's kind of, sometimes we're needy, touchy-feely. Sometimes we don't want to be bothered. We're just our emotions. And life circumstances, these Red Seas, can have us all over the place. Okay? So there again, the very word emotion is the word motion with an E in front of it. Okay? So think about how you've handled a situation. How did you respond? What was your initial reaction? Okay. Did you trust? Did you murmur? Okay. Did you complain? Did you exercise faith? Were you upset? Did you break down? Did you feel desperate? Did you believe it was all over? Did you take up the position, I wonder how God is going to handle this? God, my faith is in you. God, I don't understand it, but I trust you. Okay, think about that. How did we respond to that? Okay? So let's look at this last piece, the Exodus text itself, the next before the last. Okay? Now let's go back to the passage itself. Now we see how they respond to it, right? Now just a few minutes ago it says that they cried out to the Lord, right? But then in verse number 11 it says they murmured to what? Moses. I think I had some notes here in terms of murmuring, in that, here it is. The murmuring, this murmuring is both passive and aggressive. Okay? That is, they did not, you know how sometimes you mad, but you don't show it. They are mad and they are showing it. Okay. So they are resistant both to who they can see, Moses, and who they cannot see, God. Okay. So it's passive and aggressive. They're resistant to Moses, and they are also resistant to God. And here again is what we mentioned from the outset. Faith is not believing God exists. Not just that. But faith is believing he is with you. He is with you. Not that he is just up there somewhere. But God is with you. Now, do we believe that they believe God was with them during those 10 plagues? Do you think they believe that? I think so, because they survived them. Right? Now, how is it that the plagues was for them, and then now all of a sudden this God that was for them has now turned on them? Feelings. Okay? Feelings here. Okay? So let's look at the passage itself. Verse number 11 again. Put it up for us. They said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt. Why are they bringing up graves? Okay. They are taking us down the wilderness. What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Did they want to stay in Egypt? No. No. Okay. And see, here again, you know, sometimes we think we want what we ask God for, not understanding the cost of it. You know, freedom is not free. I mean, there's a cost for the freedom, okay? And there's a cost in this free experience. Okay? More responsibility, more accountability, more required of us, more expected of us. All of that is a part of it. Okay? You ever notice how fans treat their team? What do the fans do when they winning? But that same fan will put a bag over their head when you lose it. It's amazing. Okay? It's amazing. Okay? It's amazing. So in Egypt, God was for them. They felt he was for them. But when they get to the Red Sea, now God is against them. Okay? This is how we know that they were lacking in trust. They were lacking in faith. Okay. So they had every reason for terror, but they still could have placed their trust in God. Number one, at the least, what could have happened is that they would have been re-enslaved. That's the least that could have happened. Okay? But the worst is that they would have been slaughtered. They would have been murdered. Their families, of course, their children, and of course, the elderly. Okay? And at this juncture, they are at a place where they are beyond human escape. There is no way out. What's in front of them? Okay. Who's pursuing them? Okay. That's it. This is it. Okay. Now, have you ever been boxed in? Yeah. How did you handle being boxed in? They're bringing the mic to you. How did you handle being boxed in? Here's the mic, okay? How'd you handle being boxed in?
And through.
Say again?
Sliding through.
You slid through?
Well, it's a basketball term. Slid through.
Well, help us, Brian. What you mean?
Slid through the situation.
You got through it?
Yeah, slid through it. Find a way through it.
Okay. You were boxed in and you found a way through it. Is that what you're saying?
Box out.
Oh, okay. All right. Somebody else. You were boxed in. Okay. How'd you get through?
You got me.
Okay.
First, I rebelled.
Okay. Okay.
Then second, I surrendered.
Okay.
And lastly, not lastly, but then I gave up hope.
Okay.
And then I realized where my hope really came from.
Okay. So you were kind of like roller coaster.
Yeah.
This aggression, you rebelled. And what you went after rebellion, what'd you say?
Surrender.
Surrender. And then after that you said hopelessness.
Hopelessness.
And then ultimately
Yep.
hopeful. Yeah. Okay, over here. Boxed in. Okay. Hedged in. Trapped. Okay. Cornered. Okay.
Hello. Okay. Pastor, I feel like when I first came to you, that first time I called you, I was boxed in. I was at a place I felt like of no return. Like I didn't know how I was going to take my next breath. I didn't know how I was going to make it the next day. I didn't even know you.
Yeah.
But when I called you, I was in that box and I was ready to give up on myself and on my life.
Yeah.
And God put it on me in my head to continuously tell me to call Pastor Smith, something I didn't want to do because I don't know this man.
Yeah.
I
ain't know you.
Right.
We ain't know each other.
We ain't know each other. And so shoot. So I'm just saying though, but
Yeah.
then Sister Karen, she was shocked when I called and you took the call because she said that you don't usually just take calls from people who's not in your congregation like that. Yeah. But you took my call. And you taking my call got me where I am today.
Wow.
Allergies. Yeah. So, boxed in. Yeah. Anybody else? Boxed in. How did you handle it? How did you feel?
During time in prison, I remember I went to the hole for 2 years. People who can identify the hole, they know what it is in prison. And I couldn't do nothing but pray. They took everything. I was in the hole for 2 years, man. I ain't do nothing but pray and write and pray and write and pray and write. I had no TV or nothing. I could have lost my mind. But I knew it was a God. And the 2 years they gave me, they put me in the hole. I prayed and they just let me out a little sooner. But that was a time, man, it was horrible. At first, like Sonny was saying over there, I went through a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
I went through first I was angry. Because I went in the hole with a rage. Then it became angry. Then I said, well, I ain't gonna eat nothing. That's crazy too. Suicidal. I was already homicidal.
Yeah.
Because that's why I went to the hole.
Yeah.
Depression set in so bad, Pastor. And I just cried out, man. And I just came to the point of surrender, like Sonny was saying. It just got to the point as the days was going, then the months. I said, wait a minute. I realized I've been there. And just kept going.
Yeah.
Okay, Lord, this is what it is. But I trust you.
Were you saved before you experienced that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was a believer.
Okay.
I just wasn't serving.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Thanks.
Back 10. Corner. Right here, Netta. Right here. Yeah. Corner. Back 10. Yeah.
Pastor, times that I felt boxed in, I got what they call fight or flight. I was either going to fight my way through or I was going to run back to what was familiar, which probably got me boxed in the first place.
Wow. Hey, man, Pastor, I can remember one time I was boxed in.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about it was shameful. And I told God, if you get me out of this one, I will serve you until I die. I'll be in church on Sunday. I'll be good and faithful.
Yeah.
But when you backed up in the corner, you say anything to get out of there.
Say anything to get out, huh? Yeah. Yeah. So that you were desperate. There was a cry of desperation. And sometimes when we're desperate, we make deals. We make deals, and you just got to be careful with making deals. Yeah. And you know what I've discovered about God? You can make a promise to him, and he will do. I've seen him do what you asked him to do, knowing you weren't going to keep your promise. And I think the goal there is for us to really know who the promise keeper is. God is the promise keeper. God is the promise keeper. Because see, when we make promises and deals under duress, okay, that's the wrong motivation for making promises. It's the wrong motivation. It's like if there's this tit for tat. If you do for me, then I'll do for you. And God never makes promises based upon what we can do for him. He never does. God does not count on us to help him be God. He doesn't. He doesn't need to, because we're insufficient. So it was out of duress and desperation, and we do that sometimes. That's kind of let you know how our emotions at times are all over the place. We'll say, isn't that something you can fix your mouth to say anything? Think about that. And the heart and the head can be. Somebody said that years ago. You can make your mouth say anything. Anybody else? You were cornered, boxed. James?
For me, I felt we were on our way to Africa. We went via Bible school in Georgia, and it got pretty bad. And we were like a day or two from living out of our car. And I felt just perplexed because I'm doing not thinking your will. And then second, I don't think we handled it well. At least I did. I think she handled it better than I did. And then at the end, I think we just learned to write it out. We just wrote it out.
Your intentions, you did this of thinking this was the will of God, and yet he let you almost become homeless. Yeah. Foxes have holes. Birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man had nowhere to lay his head. Yeah. It's, and when Jesus said that, that was not a woe is me. But what Jesus was literally saying is that when it is time for me to sleep, I believe I'm going to be able to sleep. And when it's time for me to eat, I believe I'll have something to eat. Okay? And so that radical step, that radical trust, sometimes takes us all the way to the end. Even sometimes when doubt gives birth to faith. Yeah, it happens. It's happened to me any number of times. In school, I'm thinking this is, honorable, this is admirable. But, we tell you, we know what it feels like to get eviction notices. Yeah, we know what it feels like. We know what it feels like to get cutoff notices. But God came through. He let them send the notice. But he kept us. And so it's those types of experiences where he allows us to get to those boxed in, cornered in. So anybody else want to share? Boxed in. How did you handle it? What were some of your things you were feeling? Anybody else? Okay. All right. So this is where they are. Okay. This is where they are. Okay. So they have every reason for utter terror. Again, the best thing that can happen, is re-enslavement. So they still have their lives. But then again, how are they going to all get back to Egypt? But then the worst thing, of course, is the loss of life. Seeing families slaughtered and kids and the aged parents, all of that. Because God had, in fact, hardened Pharaoh's heart. Okay? No human escape. Okay? But I think here is where God, I think, wants us to be when we're facing these Red Seas. Here again, God can create the Red Sea. I mean, he can set it up. But then God can also allow it to happen. Okay. But we have to remember that he is our ally and he is not our foe. Okay. So for them, when the Creator is your ally, you don't have to be afraid of the creation, the Red Sea. Now, one of the reasons they did not have to be afraid of creation, you got to look at the 10 plagues. God used his creation for them. What were some of the plagues? Locusts. Who the locusts obey? God. He used locusts, okay. What else? Frogs. Where frogs come from? God. What else? Gnats. What else? Flies. What else? Turned the Nile River to what? blood. What else? The what? The boils, right? Okay. Okay, what else?
The death of the firstborn.
Okay, death of the firstborn. Darkness, that's 8. Who made the sun and the moon? That's his darkness. Okay, so we got that one. We got 8 so far. The fire, hail, okay? Okay, lice. And all of this belong to God. So when the one who owned everything is your ally, you don't have to be afraid of anything that has been created. Even your Red Sea. Even my Red Sea. Okay. So now I want to look at several scriptures where again we go back to that do not be afraid and all of that. Okay. First let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 1 verses 29 and following. Okay. I said to you, have no what? Dread or what? Fear of them. Okay. Next verse. Okay. The Lord who? Your God, who goes before you, is the one who will what? Fight for you. Just as he did for you in Egypt before your very eyes. Verse 31. And in the wilderness, where you saw how the Lord your God did what? Carried you, just as one carries a child, all the way that you traveled until you reached this place. For the rest of your life and for the rest of my life, okay, God will continue to give us evidence that he is God. Not only was God moving here so that Israel will know he was God. Now that Egypt would know he was God, but Israel would know he was God. You and I will forever need evidence that God is God. And what better way than allow us to be hedged in, okay, and God have to do something. Do you ever say, well, God, why you, this is a hard trial? Because God said, well, if it was easy, you think you have something to do with it. It's a hard trial. It's a hard test. Wait a minute, God, another one? Yes. Okay. So that's one passage. Still in Deuteronomy, go to chapter 3, verse 22. Okay. Here it is again. Do not fear them, for it is the Lord your God who fights for you. There again, making room for God's wrath. Vengeance belongs to who? God. Okay. Have you ever wanted to get somebody who got the first lick on you? Yes. But God has to tell us, I'm fighting for you. Okay? He has to tell us over and over and over again. Now, why is it that why do you think God talks about I fight for you? The God who goes before. Why is God using this type of language? Because whatever you go through and whatever I go through, we are fighting for our faith. You're fighting for it. And you got to remember, he is the author and the finisher of our faith. So our faith is under construction. Okay? So that's all the more reason why you and I shouldn't fight against God. Don't fight God. Okay, don't turn on God. Because he is constructing our faith. Okay, we need him to do the impossible so that we can grow. That's how we grow. Here's another passage, chapter 31, Danny, verse number 6. Be strong and what? Have no fear or dread of them, because it is the Lord your God who goes with you. Now notice, we've heard passages where God is going before, and now God is going with. That is again, here, remember, faith is not just God exists. No, God is with us. He's our ally, right? Okay. He will not fail you or what? Forsake you. Okay. Let's go to another passage. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 47. Okay. Now we're recording these scriptures because these are scriptures that you and I need to recite when we find ourselves in a box. Okay? Boxed in. 1 Samuel 17, 47. And that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into your hand. Isn't that something that he don't need anything in my hand to win? Okay. They were soldiers, right? They had the sword, they had the spear. No, God says the battle is mine. Okay. There again, that speaks of how you and I want to have our hand in stuff. We don't have, there's some situations where you and I don't have anything to do with the victory. God has given us the victory. Okay? Here's another one, Romans 8:31, and then we'll go to verse 37. What then are we to say about these things? If God is for us, it really doesn't matter who's against us. Okay? 37. Knowing all these things, we are what? Through him who loved us. So apparently there are some situations where you and I are in, and there is something required of us, and we're battling, right? Okay? We're battling. But then there are other situations we can be in where we didn't do anything and won. We are more than conquerors. God is fighting the entire battle. He allows us to oftentimes feel the heat of spiritual warfare. He allows us to feel the arrows of the enemy. Have you ever felt the sting of the enemy? That's the arrows, okay? Okay? But he does not allow the arrow to penetrate. It does not allow the arrow it's not a fatal wound. Okay? It's kind of like when Jacob was wrestling with him. It wasn't a fatal wound. But he had a limp though. See, you and I got some battle scars, but they weren't fatal wounds. That's how you know you've been through something. You got the scars to prove it, right? You ain't no chump, right? You're not green. This ain't your first rodeo. You've been through some stuff. That's why you can't quit. That's why you can't give in. You can't do that. You have been in battles before. Okay? And so God allowed us to get some wounds, but they don't hurt no more. They just, a worn out scar. Isn't that something? And see, that's why you quit putting cocoa butter on all your scars. Now, I mean that in a spiritual way. Quit trying to cover up while you got them bags under your eyes. That was when you had to cry so much. Got to remind yourself what you've been through. Preach, Pastor Marvin Timothy Smith. And it ain't even Sunday. All right? Look at 2 Chronicles. Put the 2 Chronicles up there, Danny. 2 Chronicles 20 and verse 15. Listen, O Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem, and King Jehoshaphat. This is one of our favorite scriptures, isn't it? The Lord says to you, do not fear or be dismayed at this great multitude, for the battle is not yours, but God's. What kind of God puts you in a battle that's not yours? It is to show you that he's the real warrior. And he will gain the victory for himself. Yeah. Well, God has to teach us so much about spiritual warfare. And because sometimes, you know, we don't sense that we are always engaged in spiritual warfare. Sometimes it's more intense than others, but our faith is always at stake. The adversary, the devil, is always seeking whom he may devour. And if he can get us to turn on God in a battle, if he can get us to quit on him, not live for him anymore, okay? Stop serving him, okay? He got us. So you got to know that you're in warfare. We are engaged in a battle. If you go all the way back to Exodus chapter 13, when God talks about how he's going to set the whole thing up, he says that I will gain glory, that Pharaoh would know I am God, that the Israelites would know that I'm God, all the nations would know that I am God. And God set all of that up. That blows my mind that 20 years ago, he had already set some stuff in motion that I wouldn't have to go through it in Nashville, but I would go through it in Saginaw. And that he was making me a preacher. And he let it happen. Think about the stuff he had set in motion in your life 20 years ago. And he didn't take you around it, but he took you through it. Because he was making you. God don't want no wimps. Neither do I. Don't you want somebody to know how to fight? Don't you want somebody got to have one or two scrapes? Yeah. That's the kind of people you want with you. Sometimes you just got to say, I got to fight. Got to fight. Ain't no way around this one. You got to go through it. Okay? And so that last piece, calm, confident, and courageous. What does it mean to be calm? To have your wits about you, right? Okay. You belong to God, all right? So be calm, okay? Now, confidence, your faith is not in what you can do. Your faith is in what God can do. That's your confidence, right? But then courageous is that you know God is fighting in your behalf. And you know you are in a battle. Okay? You are in a battle. Everything that you and I go through, it has the tone of warfare. Everything we go through. Okay? So that's why we can't lay down and go through it. Okay? Any questions on this piece about giving God room to work? Make sure we understand what we mean by giving him room to work. Okay. Alan? Oh, I thought Alan, you good? All right. All right. We good? All righty, it's 3 minutes to 8. I said in my prayers early this morning that I was going to let y'all out when we was finished.